Welcome to your handy lesson of today. In today's video, we're going to talk about the differences between method, approach, procedure, and technique. Let's take a look at the contents for this video. We're going to talk about the three different views of approaches, and then we're going to talk about the 14 different methods that we have in language teaching. Then we're going to go through the frameworks and lesson plans, which belong to the procedure part. And finally, we're going to go through research on strategies and techniques. Obviously, we're going to talk about the definition of technique. Finally, last but not least, we're going to talk about three important authors in language teaching methodologies, who are Jeremy Harmer, Jack C. Richards, and Theodore Stephen Rogers. Okay, so let's start. Let's start by talking about the approach. An approach is basically the conjunction of ideas related to the nature and teaching of a given language. Basically, this is the theory behind our teaching practice. And then there are three different views in approaches. We have the structural view, the functional view, and the interactional view. When we talk about the structural view, it means that our emphasis in teaching will be based on grammar. Basically on how the word order should be done and the accuracy and fluency of a language. When we talk about the functional view, we're talking about the communicative part of the language. Basically on how the language works so we can communicate and express our ideas. Finally, the interactional view. It is this part of the language which makes us interact in society. So in this case, we're going to see the language as a primarily mean for establishing and maintaining interpersonal relationships. So this is basically the approach. Now let's go on to the method. Let's define the method as to be understood as a group of procedures, a system that clearly explain how to teach a language, right? So the methodology is the system of the procedures that we follow to produce our teaching. In language teaching, we have at least 14 most important methodologies. I'm just going to mention them: grammar translation, audiolingual method, the direct method, suggestopedia, total physical response, communicative language teaching, the silent way, the natural approach, the lexical syllabus, task-based learning, immersion, community language learning, the structural method, and CLEA. So basically these are the 14 most important methodologies in language teaching. Then let's talk about procedure. A procedure can be understood as a set of actions, operations, and strategies which have to be executed accordingly to the perception on how to obtain an expected result. In our case, on how to increase the competition in a foreign language. Okay, then the procedure is how we put all the different techniques into order. Then, when we talk about procedure, we must talk about the elements of a lesson plan and the frameworks of different lesson plans. What we must have in a lesson plan then is the class profile, which talks about the context of the class we're teaching, like how many students, ages, social environment, cultural context, etc. When we talk about timetable fit means the time that we're teaching, how long the lesson will be, and how many days a week. Then we're gonna talk about different points here, different aims or objectives. The main aim, subsidiary aim, and stage aim. When we talk about the main aim, we talk about the main objective that we have for our lesson. That means the target we want to reach by the end of a lesson. Subsidiary aim will be something that is related to that main aim, but is not the main point. For example, we could say that our main objective in a lesson, my main objective in this lesson, is that you understand the differences between method, procedure, approaches, and techniques. But a subsidiary aim, at the same time, it's that you practice or that you learn a little bit more about the different methodologies and frameworks. So it's something related, but it's not the main one. Then when we talk about stage aims, we're talking about the different objectives that we have in every single step that we're following during our lesson. Then we have personal aims. This is something that's individual. Every teacher will have personal aim in every single class. Just like I have to be clearer on my instructions, or I have to speak louder, or I have to give clearer ideas. Then we have assumptions. This is what we assume that our students will be before. And anticipating the problems that we may have in the classroom during our lesson, possible solution to those anticipated problems. Then we need to include our teaching aids materials. We're going to develop the procedures. We're going to narrate and describe the procedures we're going to follow. Establish timing for every single step of our lesson. We need to say the interaction patterns, and finally, the homework. Those are the elements of a lesson plan. On the other hand, we have 4 different frameworks to follow. One is the classical PPP, which is presentation, practice, and production, right? In which we're going to be following that step, the presentation of a lesson, then some drills for students to practice, and finally, interactional patterns, which is the production part. We have the TBL framework, which is pre-task, task, and post-task, just 3 steps. Then we have the ESA, Engage, Study, and Activate, developed by Jeremy Harmer, in which we need to have an activity to engage our students' attention, then have them study and practice, and finally activate their production skills. Finally, the ITB model, which means into, through, and beyond, which is very similar to engage, study, and activate, just with different names. So these are the 4 most common frameworks in a lesson plan. Now let's talk about techniques. When we talk about technique, we're just talking about the strategies that we use in the classroom to teach. So techniques are tools that we use to obtain immediate results. This is what really happens in the classroom, in the actual teaching. Now, something interesting that I found was a research, this was a report on a research on 1,000 teachers that were interviewed to understand which were the most common techniques and recommendations for teachers. This article can be read if you go to the reference of this PDF and you read the whole report. But you can read some recommendations here for teachers, such as we need to consider the thinking time. When we ask questions to our students, we should allow them to think before we start interrupting. We should allow them from 5 to 10 seconds when we must remain quiet. We must elaborate more open-ended questions in which we have our students respond with more elaborated answers as well. We need to reprogram our mind to produce questions that are understandable for our students as well. And finally, we need to increase our verbal interaction with them so they can increase their interactional pattern, their interactional skills, and of course, their vocabulary. Finally, during this PDF, I'm going to talk to you about 3 important authors that have written many books on language teaching. Okay, these people are Jack C. Richards, T.S. Rogers, and Jeremy Harmer. Jack C. Richards is popularly known as to be the author for the Interchange series of books. Rogers has worked with Jack C. Richards to produce books on second language acquisition, on second language teaching, and strategies, also developing methodologies and approaches. And finally, Jeremy Harmer, who is the writer of many methodology books, textbooks, and well, he is also a songwriter and a poet. And he usually includes that part, that aspect of his career into his books. Okay, it is important for us to know about these authors because they are the ones who we should study and look for the reference books written by them. Okay, now it is time to practice. And this practice time, it's going to be a little bit different as this is a link to a Word document in which I would like you to do your own research on methods, procedures, approaches, and write them down, write your own investigation in this document so everybody can just read what everybody is investigating so we can grow our knowledge. Finally, we have the reference guide here. If you would like to read more about this topic, just click on the referenced websites. Well, this has been all for this lesson. Thank you very much and wait for the next lesson.